Hey guys, Zom Fox here, and today it's time to do the USFL Week 7 review of the 2023 USFL season. And as you can see by the title, this week was really, really good. This was definitely, I would say, the best week of football the USFL's had this year, and arguably the best in the modern spring football era. Every single game was a tight knit game that went down to the wire and had some insane, just overall moments. So, without further ado, let's get right into the scores. The first game was the Stallions versus Breakers. The Stallions ended up getting this one out with 24-20 to beat the Breakers at Birmingham. Then the Stars ended up beating the Maulers in a high-scoring 37-31 game at Canton, Ohio. Then on Sunday, the Gamblers ended up coming just short against the Showboats to have the Showboats go to their four-game win streak at Simons Bank Liberty Stadium in Memphis. Then the final game was the Panthers beating the Generals 25-22. These games were all insanely close, and, well, the first game to talk about is the Birmingham-New Orleans game. This game was one that is very easy to understand what happened. The Breakers had more yards on offense. They were just better on offense for the most part, except in efficiency. While their yards per play were very solid, being at 5.3, which is even better than the Stallions, the fact is that when you compare MBT to Alex Magoo, you could clearly tell one of them played a lot better. Where MBT did have 100 more yards, he actually had a 1.1 less yards per attempt, and more importantly, he had an interception to end up having a 30 less quarterback rating. This is the big reason they lost. MBT lost the battle against Alex Magoo. And the fact is, the Breakers had 3 turnovers on the day compared to the Stallions 1. Where the Stallions didn't have a ton of insanely far drives, the fact is, when they did, they made the most of it, whereas the Breakers just usually turned the ball over. This led to the Breakers being down most of the game, and even though they had a very good resurgence in the fourth quarter, it ended up being too little too late, and they ended up losing the game. Now we get to one of the really good ones. A lot of people probably didn't expect this game to be high scoring. I, however, did. I made in my betting picks a very bold prediction that this game was going to be a very high scoring game. And it was. 37-31 was the score. This game was a very tight game for basically the whole time. And in the end, what ended up happening was the Maulers ended up getting a touchdown late in the game to get back within reach of potentially winning the game. But then they went for their 4th and 15 and ended up failing it. And then once the Stars were able to get a field goal at the end, that ended up basically being the game. This game was overall close. There were a lot of other very important moments that ended up going against the Maulers and for the Stars to end up, having the Stars win. But overall, this was a very entertaining game. That was a very great one, and it was definitely the best game of the weekend and one of the best in spring football history. Then we get another great one in the Gamblers Showboats. This game was one where the Showboats had a pretty big lead, and then the Gamblers in the end nearly pulled it off to make the comeback. The ending was even more insane. The beginning of the insanity starts with the Showboats fumbling the ball late in the fourth quarter. After they fumbled it, the Houston was able to get the ball, and they immediately scored a touchdown to take the lead to go up to 20-16. But then after getting up 20-16, you had the Showboats go with one insane play, a 64-yard passing touchdown, to retake the lead to get it up to 23-20. Then the Gamblers ended up throwing an interception, and that ended up ending the game. The ending was insane. It was something else, man. It was a crazy ending, another crazy game this weekend. It was definitely a great one. Seeing that live, seeing the Memphis crowd be so excited was awesome. Then the last game was the Panthers versus Generals. This game was one where it was simply put, one team just got it going too late. After the injury to DeAndre that happened late in the game, wish him a speedy recovery, Loletto came back to form. In the beginning of the game, he had played so bad that he ended up getting just straight up benched. But when he came back playing well, it was too late. Josh Levitt already did a decent number on the Generals, and then he had one more really great drive late in the fourth quarter to get his quarterback rating to a 120. And in the end, the Generals just couldn't win. The Generals got completely outpaced on yards, and more importantly, they got beat in rushing yards. The Generals are not supposed to ever be beaten rushing, yet they were in this game. Panthers got the W back in the win column after being 0-4 at home, and now they're 3-0 on the road and one of the weirdest teams in the league. Now, in terms of players of the week, the first one to mention is the offensive player of the week in Josh Love. I personally, even as a Panthers fan, I'm not a huge fan of this. I think that his quarterback rating was insane. I think the fact is that Cookis and a couple other guys just did more on offense, but I digress. He had a 55 completion percentage, went 16-29 for 264 yards and a 9.1 yards per attempt, with 3 touchdowns, and he had 3 yards rushing on 5 attempts. Congrats to him winning Offensive Player of the Week. It's the second one. And basically, it's just continuing the fact that the Panthers have just had an insane amount of Players of the Week at this point, as they've now had like 6. So, congrats to him. We once again had co-defensive players of the week. Polling did barely beat out Atkins in the poll, but like I said last time, is that they're basically determined on the overall percentage point. As for Quinton Polling of the Stallions, he ended up having a fumble recovery as well as 11 tackles, 7 which were solo, 2 sacks, and 3 TFLs. Overall, great game for him, and then Atkins himself had an insane game. He did have less tackles at only 4 and 3 solo, though he is a D tackle. And they had the same amount of sacks at 2, and he had 1 less TFL at 2 instead of 3, but the big difference was that he had 5 pass deflections, which is insane. So congrats to both these guys for winning Player of the Week, Co-Defensive Player of the Week. They both really did have outstanding games, and I'm honestly surprised that, the Twitter landscape did justice and got them both Player of the Week because they both were really good this week. Then lastly is Josh Simmons. He had his stat in like everything, but what he won it for was for kick return. He had an 88 long. He had a kick return touchdown. He averaged 33. He had an insane day just returning kicks. And essentially, if you get a kick return touchdown, you basically just, win Player of the Week. So overall, congrats to all those guys for winning it. This was definitely an insane week for performances, so congrats to all those guys. Now, in terms of attendance, we had 2 home games this week in the Stallions and the Showboats. So for the Stallions attendance, this was honestly a very good turnout for them. Apparently, there were some other Birmingham events going on at the time, which made the attendance even more surprising it was this good. This might not have been their best, ever, or even as good as like week 1, but they've been really bad recently. But to see an actual crowd show up in this game was really good. The away side, once again, was still barren, but not many people are really supposed to go over there. But they overall had a huge increase over last week's, like 5 people. And then the home side was definitely a lot better. Now, does this match the highs of the Birmingham Iron? I did not say so. This is definitely over 10,000 fans per game, which we could not say for a lot of the other games they've had this year. So this was a huge uptick for them and a great sign for the league that this team could, get some fans back in stands. And I truly do believe a big part of that is just the issue I said before of having so many home games in a row. You create no scarcity. There's no desire to have to go to them if you can just go to the next week. They do have 1 home game left. I hope they have a really good crowd for that one. This was a rivalry game, so maybe the crowd dwindles down, but hopefully it increases to have a really great send-off for them. Then the next game was the Showboats attendance. There was a lot of bad speculation going on early in the season, especially by me as well, when they were 0-3 and they looked really bad. But they're winning, and the crowd turned up really well. Now, I know some people are saying they only had like 10,000. Dude, this stadium holds a lot of people. They had over 13,000. They definitely beat any Memphis Express game again, creating to the point where even though the Stallions are disappointing compared to the Iron, the Showboats are doing really good. They're definitely doing better than the Express did. If you watch like any Express game and you look on the angles in the TV and the match, or not the match replays, but the highlights, dude, there's nowhere near as many people as this one. The Showboats have been doing an excellent job at getting people in the stands, and out there on a 4-game win streak, we could legit see them have very, very solid crowds and hit over 20,000 again. This week, they definitely had over 13, probably over 14. Like I said, they probably about 15,000. They had more than the Express ever did. Hopefully next season we get some of these actual attendance numbers because the Showboats definitely have been a very good sign for the league. Them and the Panthers have been really good. So congrats to the Showboats and Memphis as a whole. It's great to see them embrace this team and actually, have a football team they can embrace. It's not just college. And, I mean, hey, the Showboats are really close to making the playoffs, so that's a great thing for them. Now, as for the TV ratings, last week I said was overall probably the most disappointing week of the season. This week, not so much. So, at first glance, this week's ratings are very to bad, a lot of people would say. The Stallions Breakers, the game on Fox, ended up having 700,000 viewers. Then the Stars Maulers game at night had 160,000 on FS1. Then the Gamblers versus the Showboats on USA had 250,000. And then the final game, the Panthers versus Generals on FS1 had 270,000. At first glance, that's probably not the best, but you got to think about it. It is a Memorial Day weekend, and unlike Easter, Memorial Day weekend is a weekend where TV ratings usually go down due to the fact that, it's basically the opening of summer. Everything, pools, lakes, and all that usually open that weekend. So the best way is also to compare it to last year. Last year, week 7, this year did very similar. The Fox game getting 700,000 was definitely less than the Fox game last year on Sunday. So that one is definitely a little bit disappointing, but considering the fact that it's within 150,000, it's not terrible. And then, whereas the night game, you may say for the FS1 night game to night game, since they're both the 9 p.m. games, that is a very bad thing for this year. But not really. Look, the number is bad. I'm not going to say, it's great or anything. But remember, that went head to head with the NBA Eastern Conference Final Game 7, which is like the most viewed Eastern Conference Final game in TNT history. I think it had like over 8 million average, or it might have been like 13 million. Let's just say it was a lot. So you basically went head to head with a very important playoff game. And since it was on TNT, it's on the same, things that FS1 is on. And I think a lot of people would pick that game over it. Essentially, if that game wasn't happening at the same time, this game would have probably matched, if not done better than the Breakers Panthers game last year did. Then the USA game, having 250,000, on par literally with last year's USA game, just a little bit better. And the FS1 game is on par with most FS1 games. So this week really wasn't that bad. And I think that overall, the important thing to note is that the overall ratings are staying consistent rather than going down, because that's what we saw with the USFL last year and the XFL this year. Was as the season went on, we saw a lot of decrease in viewership. But considering the fact the XFL is able to manufacture good viewership by spacing out some of their ESPN and ABC games, the USFL didn't do that. They've actually just, been the same. And considering the fact this is the only week with 3 games on cable, we're going to see a huge increase next week. And overall, I think that the ratings are definitely being overblown in terms of their badness. Now, the TV ratings themselves, we don't know those yet at the time of this recording. They haven't really come out yet. But they should match what they did last year, if not do a bit better, due to the fact it was Memorial Day weekend. They had very similar numbers. But, barring it's something insane, I'll put it in the description later whenever they come out. So overall, here's the TV ratings. I think that the USFL did okay this week. This wasn't really great or bad. I think a lot of people are saying it's pretty bad when really it's not. Context matters in this case, and overall they've been very consistent with last year. So overall, decent, not great, but decent. Now, in terms of the standings, we have gotten to the point now where every single team has a 2-2 divisional record, as well as every team still having a chance to make the playoffs. The way you look at it is that the South is a dogfight for second place. We have 3 teams tied with 4 and 3. Then the North is separated by 2 games from top to bottom, with a lot of teams vying for that second spot. We have 2 separate teams who are riding both really good win streaks and bad loss streaks. The Stars and Showboats are on 3 and 4 game streaks respectively, and then the Breakers and Generals are on 3 and 4 game losing streaks respectively. So overall, the playoffs are still very much wide open, and that's shown in what the USFL just tweeted out earlier today in the playoff scenarios for Week 8. Remember, we're already in Week 8, and despite that, the only team that can actually clinch or get eliminated is just the Stars. The Stars are a clinch with a win and a Maulers and Generals loss, so very, very small chance that happens. But as for the South, not a single team can clinch or be eliminated, which I think is insane. The fact that we're this far in and really every team still has a shot is incredible, but that's just proof of how insane the season has been. So overall, that'll do it for this video. If you enjoyed this content, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. We do at least 3 videos a week during the USFL season. And now that we're getting close to the end of the season, we're going to start having, the eliminated videos come out. So make sure to be on the lookout for that. And as always, have a great night.